This is Urban Lullabies, where we drift through forgotten legends, unsolved mysteries, and the quiet terror that waits just beyond the trailhead. Tonight's story is inspired by real missing 411 cases, the unexplained vanishings that haunt national parks across the world. Told through the voice of a retired search and rescue officer, this journey begins with a pattern no one wants to admit, and ends with a truth that won't let him sleep. So settle in, turn down the lights, and listen closely. The forest is waiting. You learn early on that there are things you don't say out loud in the forest. I worked search and rescue for over 2 decades, mostly in the Pacific Northwest, thick, wet woods where the moss hangs low and the air smells like the inside of a locked shed. My job was simple: find the ones who got lost, the hikers who underestimated the trail, the kids who wandered off at camp, the tourists who thought maps were optional. Most times we found them, scraped up, dehydrated, maybe with a broken ankle and a red face full of mosquitoes. They'd be embarrassed, grateful, they'd laugh, cry, promise to never do it again. But then there were the others, the ones we never found. You're told it's just the way of the wilderness, that nature doesn't care if you're young or old, smart or clueless, that it takes and doesn't explain itself. But after a while, after enough midnight call-outs and shattered families, you start to notice things, patterns, things you're not supposed to put together. The same missing posters, year after year, pinned to ranger station bulletin boards. The same GPS coordinates showing up in different cases, places where compasses spin, where dogs won't track, kids vanishing within arm's reach of their parents, adults disappearing between 2 trees with no trail, no scent, no trace. Sometimes there'd be a storm right after, sudden, hard, like the weather itself was scrubbing the forest clean. We never talked about it officially, not in briefings, not in reports. But when we sat around the fire at base camp, the older guys would lean in and say things like, "Did you feel it out there today? Or that place? It doesn't like to be looked at too long." You'd learn to recognize those zones, the ones where the radio would cut out, even though you had line of sight, where birds stopped singing, where the forest suddenly felt too quiet, too watchful. I remember the first time I stepped into one of those places. I was green, maybe 24, tracking a missing hiker near a glacial ravine. The trees grew tighter the deeper we went in. The air got colder. At some point, my partner stopped walking and whispered, "You hear that?" I listened. I didn't hear anything. And that was the problem. No wind, no bugs, no leaves crunching, just nothing. A dead stillness so thick you could choke on it. We found nothing that day. Not even boot prints. But I left that forest with the feeling I'd been seen. Like something old and quiet had let me go. After a while, you start to keep notes. Not the kind you turn in. Private ones. Names, coordinates, times, weather, phases of the moon. You start to wonder if maybe these woods aren't empty. Maybe they're just really good at pretending. And once that thought gets into you, it never really leaves. If you work long enough in the parks, you start to see the holes, not in the trails, or the maps, in the records. People go missing. That's normal. You expect some of it in 84 million acres of forest and mountain. But then you start to notice how often the explanations don't line up. I kept a list, not just the official ones, but the stories passed around in hushed tones, names they didn't publish, the files that got pulled. It's always the same types of places: granite-rich areas, near boulder fields or cold creeks, high concentrations of trees where light filters down in strips like cathedral glass. I'm not talking about the casual, off-trail hikers. I mean kids with experienced scout leaders, hunters who knew every inch of that land, people with GPS beacons, compasses, even backup radios. And it's not just that they disappear, it's how. There was the 3-year-old who vanished just 20 feet ahead of his mother on a trail in Colorado. She looked down to tie her boot, and when she looked up, He was gone. No footprints. No sound. Nothing. Search teams combed the area for days. They brought dogs, helicopters, volunteers, grid searches. Not a trace. Until 2 weeks later, a local spotted the boy's jacket neatly folded on a log 4 miles away, across a raging creek with no bridge and no signs he ever crossed. Or the teenage girl who went missing in Yosemite. Her footprints led up a snowy hill and just stopped. No sign of a struggle. No drag marks. No signs of turning around. It was like she'd simply stepped out of the world. We used to call those places vanishing points. The kind of areas where maps mean nothing, and the woods seem to fold in on themselves. I remember one search where we found the victim's socks, but no boots. Then a mile later, the boots, then nothing. He was never found. Sometimes it's clothing that's wrongly folded, like someone undressed them carefully. Other times it's the shoes that are missing, but the feet were never bruised. Try walking barefoot through underbrush for 10 miles and not leave a mark. And the worst are the places where the scent just stops. Dogs will lead you confidently through brush and trees, then suddenly start circling, whining. Some even refuse to move forward, like something's blocking them that we can't see. I once worked with a dog handler who said it felt like the trail went straight up into the air. It gets into your head. You wonder, are these people walking into something? Are they being taken? Or are they just ceasing to be? Some SAR teams have started calling it the blink. One moment they're there. The next, the forest blinks, and they're gone. I stopped trying to explain it after my 5th case like that. Now, when people ask, I just say this. The forest remembers, but it doesn't always return what it takes. The rules we follow. No one writes them down. They're not in the handbooks or printed on the wall of the ranger station. But if you're out here long enough, searching for the lost, listening to what the woods won't say, you learn the rules. We don't call them superstitions. That word feels flimsy out here. They're more like survival habits, unspoken codes passed between veteran searchers like sacred instructions. Don't search alone, even in daylight, even on easy terrain. It's not just about bears or getting turned around. It's because the moment you're alone, the forest changes, the trees feel closer, the wind starts to whisper, and sometimes you'll swear something is pacing you just outside your vision, just beyond the last echo of your own footsteps. If you hear your name in the woods, don't answer. Doesn't matter if it sounds like your partner, your commander, your mother. We've had searchers swear they heard a missing child calling them from the trees, clear as day, begging for help. They followed the voice. One of them didn't come back. We found his flashlight 3 miles away, still on. No blood, no trail, just his name scratched faintly into the bark of a pine tree, over and over, like he was trying to remember who he was. Don't follow the lights. Every so often, someone reports seeing strange orbs, soft, pale, flickering, just through the trees. They float like fireflies, but move with purpose. I saw them once. We were on a night search, heavy fog rolling in. When I spotted a dull glow ahead, I thought it was another team's headlamp, until it rose 6 feet off the ground and passed straight through a tree. The newer guy on our team followed it. He was gone for nearly an hour before we found him kneeling in a dried-out stream bed, staring straight up. When we shook him, he looked at us like he didn't know where he was. Said the light was humming. Said it showed him something behind the sky. He doesn't work Sarah anymore. And never talk about the staircases. Yeah, they're not in every park, but some rangers swear by them. Freestanding staircases, just out there in the middle of nowhere. Sometimes stone, sometimes carpeted, like they were ripped from a suburban home and dropped into the wild. The rule is simple. Don't go near them. Don't touch them. And for God's sake, don't climb. We lost a man in 03. Rookie laughed when we warned him. He climbed halfway up one of those things before the air changed. Everything went quiet. He looked down at us, blinked, and then he was gone. Not fell, gone. We waited. Hours passed, days, no trace. Sometimes when I'm deep in the woods, I think about calling his name, just to see what happens. But I never do, because we don't talk about it. We just follow the rules, and we hope the forest doesn't notice us. Most never come back. You'd be surprised how quickly the woods can swallow a person, even in clear weather, even when they know the land. But sometimes, one comes back, and that's when it gets stranger, because they never come back the way they left. There was a boy, 5 years old, went missing near Crater Lake. 1 second he was tossing pebbles into the water, the next he was gone. No splash, no footprints, no sound, just gone. We searched for 6 days. On the 7th, a couple camping 2 miles from the site woke up to find the boy standing outside their tent. No shoes, no jacket, clean like he hadn't spent a minute in the wild. When they brought him in, his eyes looked wrong. Not scared, not tired, just distant. His mother hugged him, sobbing. He didn't cry, didn't speak. When the ranger asked where he'd been, the boy said, "The tall man in the forest kept me safe. He told me not to talk until I got home." They pressed for more. He didn't say another word for a week. Another time, we found a woman, mid-30s, experienced hiker, missing for 3 days in Olympic National Park. She stumbled out of the trees just as the sun was going down, barefoot and dazed. She had no memory of what happened. Said she had been hiking, then the trees got quiet. After that, nothing. Her phone, which had been fully charged, was found in her pack, battery completely drained. The last photo was pitch black, but when enhanced, it looked like a face, pressed close to the lens. No features, just the outline, like something made of smoke. The weirdest thing, she didn't want it back, refused to even look at the photo. Then there was the hunter in Montana, gone for 4 days. They found him walking out of the woods barefoot, clothes inside out. He was singing, a low, tuneless hum. He looked directly at me and said, "The forest let me go this time." They say trauma does strange things, that the mind protects itself when things get too terrible to remember. But what if it's not forgetting? What if it's hiding something it was told not to share? Sometimes, it feels like these people were borrowed, like something took them, looked at them, and then sent them back. And sometimes, I wonder how many came back looking like themselves, but weren't the same inside. The forest keeps its secrets, but now and then, it lets one slip out, changed, and watching. Some of the worst cases don't end with silence. They end with something left behind. We found the backpack propped neatly against the base of a pine, like someone had set it down and meant to return. The missing hiker, mid-20s, solo camper, experienced, had vanished 2 weeks earlier. Her tent was zipped from the inside. Her boots were still placed just outside, facing the trail. But the pack was 3 miles off that trail, deep in an area where the terrain turned steep and cruel. Inside the bag, half a water bottle, a granola bar, a compass that no longer pointed north, and a small Canon point-and-shoot. It was surprisingly intact. We turned it on. Battery was almost dead. One of the rangers scrolled through the photos while I logged the gear. The early pictures were normal. Trail shots, selfies, a lake in the distance, trees swaying in golden hour light. Then, they changed. Blurry, out-of-focus frames. Photos taken at night. Dozens of them. Random branches. Flash reflections. Dirt. Her face, half lit, eyes wide, like she was holding the camera low. Then, there was one that made everyone in the room go quiet. She was crouched low, snapping a photo over her shoulder. Behind her, just at the edge of the frame, something tall, not quite human. No visible eyes, no mouth, but its outline was sharp against the trees. Too symmetrical, too still. Its limbs looked wrong. No one spoke for a long time. Someone finally whispered, "Could be pareidolia." Another added, "Could be a branch." But no one believed either. We checked the timestamps. The photos had been taken over 6 hours. All during the night she vanished. The final image was just black, a full screen shot of nothing, but when we enhanced it later, brightened and sharpened, we saw fingers pressed against the lens, thin, too long, like they were reaching in. We never found her body. No tracks, no blood, no scent, just that bag, that camera. Sometimes, at night, I still think about what it means to take photos when you're scared, not running, not screaming, just snapping picture after picture in the dark, hoping the flash will show you what's there, or maybe hoping it won't. I don't know what took her, but whatever it was, it let us keep the camera. The forest has its own kind of silence. It's not the absence of sound, it's the weight of it. I've been deep in the pines when the wind dies, and the birds vanish, and the air gets thick, like it's listening to you breathe. That's when the voices start. It doesn't happen on every search, but when it does, you know it instantly. A missing person's name, drifting through the trees, clear, familiar, sometimes pleading, sometimes calm, and always coming from the wrong direction. There was a case in Oregon. A teenage girl disappeared on a solo hike. We were 2 days into the search when one of our guys, Sam, stopped in the middle of the trail. "I hear her," he said. We all froze. Then we heard it too. A voice, faint but unmistakable, calling, "Help, please, help me." We followed it. We knew better. We did, but we followed, through thorns and dry creek beds, past the search perimeter, and half a mile into unmarked terrain. The voice kept calling, fainter, sadder, always just ahead. And then it stopped. We found nothing, not even footprints. Sam swore it was her. He'd listened to her voice on the missing report recording, said it matched, said it felt like she was right there. But the area we ended up in, it wasn't right. Trees too close together, light wrong. The ground felt soft, like something beneath the soil had just shifted. We marked it and left. He didn't sleep that night. The next morning, we found one of the other SAR guys sitting outside his tent at dawn, staring into the woods. Said someone had been circling camp all night. Said they'd whispered his name, his wife's voice, his brother's voice, the girl's voice. I've had it happen once. Mid-search, late fall, a boy had gone missing near a cluster of old-growth pines. We'd been out for 18 hours straight. I was exhausted, barely holding the trail line. That's when I heard my dad's voice. He died in 2009. He said my name, same tone he used when I was a kid, and wandered too far, like he was just over the next ridge, waiting for me. I didn't follow. I didn't even move. I just turned around slowly and walked back toward camp, because once you hear the voices, you learn. They don't want help. They want company, and they know exactly who to sound like to get it. Not every report makes it to the public. For every case you hear about on the news, there are 2 more that vanish into paperwork, buried in red tape, or written off with convenient phrases like animal attack, disoriented hiker, or accidental fall. And maybe that's true, sometimes. But I've seen the ones that don't make sense, like the boy whose clothes were found neatly folded 30 feet up in a pine tree. No blood, no tracks, no injuries, just his shirt, pants, and shoes, clean and dry, in the upper branches, like someone had set them there with care. Or the veteran backcountry guide, who radioed in from a known trail junction, saying, "There's someone up ahead. I don't think they're alive." Then silence. We found his radio, his pack, his belt, no body, no sign of struggle. The GPS said he walked 50 feet forward, then disappeared. We tried filing reports, but the higher-ups always stepped in. Sometimes it was the Forest Service. Sometimes it was someone in a dark SUV with no ID badge who told us the search was being suspended. Environmental risk, terrain instability, or simply, this is above your clearance. Once in Yellowstone, a senior ranger pulled me aside and told me flat out, You'll sleep better if you stop asking questions. I didn't sleep that night anyway. Sometimes you hear things from the locals, whispers about places the tribes don't go, old stories, not just legends, but warnings, passed down long before there were hiking maps and ranger stations, places where the ground doesn't take your weight right, where compasses spin in lazy circles, where people vanish, and the woods close behind them like water over a sinking stone. And then there are the sightings, tall shapes, outlines in the fog, lights that move against the wind, and things watching from just beyond the firelight. It's never official, never in print, but when you've seen enough, when you've felt it breathing behind you, you know. You know some part of this country has been cordoned off by something older than paper and tape, and we pretend it's wilderness. We put it on postcards, we sell it with trail guides, but we don't talk about what lives there. Not really, because whatever it is, it doesn't want to be known. It just wants to be fed. Even now, years after I left the search and rescue teams behind, the forest still calls to me. Its presence clings to my skin, the way a shadow follows you on a cloudy day. I thought that walking away, hanging up my boots, would finally close the door on all those lost souls, the ones we never found, the ones whose stories ended in silence. But the forest is patient. It remembers every whisper of the wind through the pines, every desperate scream swallowed by the trees, every footprint lost to the moss and mud. It remembers the faces, pale, frightened, confused, of hikers who vanished without a trace, swallowed whole by the wild. Some were children, some seasoned outdoorsmen, but all were gone, leaving behind only questions and no answers. Sometimes I wonder if the forest itself is a living thing, something ancient and powerful, something that watches, waits, and decides. I don't know if it's anger or sorrow, or something else entirely, but it holds on to those who wander in, and it never forgets. I still dream of the ones I couldn't save. Their faces haunt the edges of my sleep. I see a little girl, maybe 8 years old, with tangled hair and wide eyes full of fear. She looks lost, standing alone at the edge of a clearing, calling for someone who never comes. I see an older man, his clothes torn and dirty, eyes full of regret and exhaustion. I feel their cold hands reaching out through the darkness, and then I wake, heart pounding, breath shallow, and the silence in my room feels like the forest itself pressing in. There were times in the field when I felt the forest was watching me too, not just the rustle of animals or the crack of branches underfoot, something else, a presence, unseen, but heavy, like eyes burning in the dark, tracking every step, every breath. Some of my teammates stopped coming back too, not from injury or accident, but from something less explainable. They talked about strange lights between the trees, voices calling their names, sudden chills that froze the blood. One by one they quit, unwilling to face what lurked in the shadows. And yet, the disappearances continued. The cases never stopped. Every year more stories surfaced from deep inside the national parks. Reports of hikers who vanished near the same spots, under eerily similar circumstances. Missing 411 cases. They called them unsolved, unexplainable. I kept going back, drawn by a compulsion I couldn't explain. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was a need to find closure, or to understand something that defied reason. But the deeper I went, the more the forest swallowed me whole. There's no map for what I saw. No logic to explain the silence after the calls went out. No trail that led back to safety. Only the forest, vast and indifferent, holding its secrets close like a jealous guardian. Now sitting in the quiet of my home, far from the woods, I realize something. The forest doesn't just remember those it's taken. It remembers those who walked its paths and looked away. It remembers the promises made to find the missing, and the failures to keep them. And perhaps most terrifying of all, the forest remembers me. I don't know what will become of those still lost in the shadows. I don't know if the forest will ever release them, or if it ever intends to. But I do know this: the stories don't end here. They never really end. If you find yourself hiking through the towering trees, heed this warning. Listen to the silence. Watch for the signs, because the forest speaks in its own way, and sometimes it calls out for you. But be careful, not everyone who answers comes back. The forest remembers, and it waits. Thank you for listening to Urban Lullabies. If the forest called your name tonight, don't answer. New stories arrive each week, strange, slow, and softly told, for those who listen in the dark. Until next time, sleep carefully and stay on the path.